Hello, my name is Linda Foran, and I am presenting for you a topic, Fitting a Square Peg into a Round Hole, Transferring Stakeholder Theory from Business to Education. Like any well-intended doctoral student, when it became time to find a conceptual framework, it was only natural that I reflected upon organizational theories I'd studied in the past, or that I moved straight to Google Scholar and searched for theories. With my dissertation based on principals' perceptions of a mandatory teacher evaluation policy, my interest was piqued when I saw stakeholder theory. What is stakeholder theory? It's a theory that attempts to define the relationship between owners and the stakeholders by observing the management practices implemented for the pursuit of an articulated organizational goal. But wait, this might not work because it dealt with owners and organizations. Why would I even think to apply this business theory as a conceptual framework for an educational study? I thoroughly studied the concepts of stakeholder theory and found two concepts that would impact my choice. The first was a study by Freeman, who is a leader in developing stakeholder theory as it related to business and management. He defines stakeholder in an organization as any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. My second study was by Mitchell, Agel, and Wood, who found that a relationship exists between the firm and stakeholders, either because the firm is dependent upon the stakeholders for its survival, or that stakeholders are dependent upon the firm to protect their rights and achieve their interests. How does stakeholder theory work as a framework for educational research? I determined that a reciprocal relationship existed between the owner of the firm or the firm and the stakeholders. Is there a relationship between the legislature who created the policy and the principals who were mandated to implement a policy? That's what I was looking for. Stakeholder theorists in the past have been training managers and executives in capitalistic business environment or teachers at a business school. However, the key word I found embedded in the theory is relationships. The process I used for a successful transition was first become very familiar with stakeholder theory in its original context. Second, I looked for commonalities between the research to be completed on my dissertation and the need for an appropriate theoretical framework. I wasn't content to find several applications of the theory to support the transition. It was a very thorough research process. I finally achieved success with a study by Atkinson and McCrindle, who reinforced the potential for using stakeholder theory in educational research. They identified the government as the primary stakeholder in the public sector, mirroring the role of owner found in the private sector. And in their study, the Department of Education was a primary stakeholder. Finally, the words stakeholder and owner and government were coming together. Johnson Kramer also noted the power of a large corporation was similar to that of a governmental power when he explained stakeholder theory. Day, Harris, and Hadfield noted that the dilemma for many principals in their study was the responsibility principals had for the implementation of an externally imposed policy. They were looking at stress and the impact of stress on principal performance. The policy, or the implementation of the policy, may challenge personal core values or moral purposes, supporting the research completed by Wicks, Gilbert, and Freeman, Sir Giovanni, and Janssens and Sineve, and the relationship found between morals, ethics, and stakeholder theory. I was now beginning to tie in the relationship between the legislature and principals as the owner and the stakeholder. And now I was looking at the impact of the policy implementation on the stakeholder. This slide tries or attempts to determine the two different pieces of business versus education. The top slide in purple talks about how there's an owner and a stakeholder. And the pieces between include the relationships between the two, the ethics in their relationship, and the management practice in order to achieve the organizational goal, which in the case of business would be financially success. The second level is the Michigan legislature, who is in the role of owner. The policy mandate, which is what is tying together the principal as a policy implementer or a stakeholder. And in the case of my study, I looked at the relationship between policy implementation and then job satisfaction, efficacy, and stress. It is possible to move a business theory into educational policy. It might have been a challenge, it might have been difficult, but it was possible, even if I was putting a square peg in a round hole. What I found is by moving the lens from business to education, I was able to apply stakeholder theory to my dissertation, using that legislature as the owner or the firm and identifying principals as stakeholders. To review, stakeholder theory is the conceptual framework for my dissertation, which was titled A Study of Principals' Perceptions as Implementers of Michigan's Mandated Teacher Evaluation Policy. In the study, I'm looking for the relationships between the legislature and the policy implementers, or the principals. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.